Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from October 9th to the 15th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of it as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so, of course pending whatever incremental reform we're supposed to get from now until the end of the year. But the thing is, I do believe the flip is going to switch, and when that happens, a lot of wealth is going to be created, so I figure I might as well learn how to take advantage so that you can benefit yourself, your family, and your community and make a little bit of money along the way. And quick disclaimer, none of this is advice. It's more or less a perspective from somebody, myself, who's had skin in the game, and so take from it what you will, but as always, invest at your own risk. But with that, from Marijuana Moment, a big one, saying the quiet part out loud as cannabis rescheduling would supersize the industry. Yes, we're all well aware, and that's why we're holding out for this, as former DEA heads and White House drug czars warn Biden admin. Why they need to warn them is beyond me, of course. There's many benefits to rescheduling, and so why Tom even wants to write it like that makes me want to throw up. But all that to point out is that we've got 6 former DEA heads and 5 former White House drug czars admitting that rescheduling is going to be a massive victory for the industry. That's what I'm getting out of this. Let me know if you get anything different, but I don't, again, want to spend too much time on every story. I want to share with you the juice of it and then invite you to go grab the links. I'm not going to go any further because then it just gets Kevin Sabet involved, and it's like, Tom, come on, why are you doing that to yourself? So with that, why states ought to want to end prohibition, or at least at the federal level? Well, MJ Biz Daily tells it like it is. From the first state to end cannabis prohibition in 2014, Colorado sales surpassed $15 billion since adult use legalization. I know I've shared this many times, but for anyone new to the channel, this is perspective that many people aren't even aware of. Considering Colorado has a small population of just over like 5 million or 6 million people, roughly around there, the fact that they did $15 billion in less than 10 years, tax revenue exceeding $2.5 billion since launching. It's incredible. And the fact that more states don't want to jump on board, I mean, obviously we've seen almost half of America, and I believe Ohio and Florida will be 24 and 25. You know, clearly half of the states are getting the picture, and there are major benefits from all this, and that's why we're pushing for it. And so on that note, from Colorado, I saw this from Meta Jawbone, figured I would share it. It comes straight from the mouth of former Rep. Ed Perlmutter, who is the champion of the original Safe Banking Act, which we might finally see get across the line. But in an interview, which you can grab the link if you're interested in the comments, he told Benzinga that he thinks rescheduling can come as soon as 6 to 9 months or by the summer of next year. So no definitive answer, pretty useless. All that to say, this is like the worst case scenario if the rescheduling announcement is going to be used as a political tool, but you think they need a victory sooner than that. All that to say is I think we're still expecting by November or December 2nd, which would have been the 90-day deadline from the original announcement in the summer. From HHS, which I think is more in line with what Very Sharp is saying. All that to say, just sharing this because, of course, you can grab the interview and watch it if you're interested. But on top of that, again, why wouldn't politicians, if they were genuinely working for Americans, want to do this? Because the data doesn't lie. More and more we get states made more than $5.7 billion in cannabis tax revenue over 18-month period, new Federal Census Bureau data reports. And again, for the Federal Census Bureau data to report this and acknowledge this, you have to think we're moving in a direction that resolves the problems of prohibition as opposed to the opposite. You'd like that to be the case. Anyways, you can pause to read more. I'm basically reflecting their findings here. And then there's a little bit more down here. Figured I would show you the graph because that's obviously the juiciest part, makes it easiest. A bit more info here. Otherwise, you can grab the link in the comments if you're interested and pause to read those snippets. But with that, also just have to say, is this some sort of foreshadowing? Because why are we getting articles like this if we aren't expecting some sort of announcement in the coming months? As from EBN, random article, Cannabis as a Schedule III drug, what the new classification means for insurance companies. And I think you're only asking yourself this question if there's some sort of reason to believe that cannabis will move to Schedule III. And so, of course, we're all well aware of that, what we're holding out for, so just wanted to share some of these updates. While we got this one from Marijuana Moment, as GOP cannabis banking bill sponsor says Senate floor vote on hold until House passage assured. Cannabis financing exec who spoke to him says Steve Daines is going to slow this down until there's a clear path through the House side. And as always, this is referring to the Safer Banking Act, a bill that is desperately needed for all the small business owners and social equity entrepreneurs that were lied to by the Dems. That's why we want this bill passed. Of course, based on how things always end up in Congress, it never gets passed, and hence why we're expecting the rescheduling announcement to be, the savior of all this. And so while we're hopeful this will still get its light, they just go back and forth. It's like they never intend to pass it. I mean, we've seen this same old song and dance over and over again, 2.5 years. But with that from Brady Cobb, who is a former lobbyist, ran a company that sold to Cresco and now runs Sunburn in Florida. But he has a lot of experience in D.C. and some wise words here. As predicted, the House is now the problem. What do you know? Political theater. You just have to understand that it seems like almost all of this is staged and planned, and you just have to be able to control your emotions as we go through it, keep yourself level-headed, and make, hopefully, decisions that will pan out to be correct in time. But it's passed the House 7 times, but couldn't get a vote in the Senate, and when senators finally try to move it in the House, it dissolves into chaos, right? Weird coincidences, but onward. P.S. Schedule 3 does not require any action from Congress. This is, again, why we're hopeful that announcement is going to come through. And I think this is probably comment of the week. The more irony is that the DEA is going to be the savior of cannabis. You cannot make this shit up, but if the DEA goes, yes, HHS is right, we're going to move this to Schedule 3, it's like, fuck. After all this time, the DEA has been the problem in the way, and then what do you know, right? The irony is just, you cannot make this shit up. And so at the same time, for Marijuana Moment, this is almost to be expected as German lawmakers delay cannabis legalization bill debate due to the conflict in the Middle East. The global political situation is the reason for the delay, but lawmakers said they will make sure everything gets done somehow. There's always going to be a reason to delay progress, and again, I know most people in the world don't really care about cannabis, and this is a bigger issue to many more people, fair enough, but, well, if Ukraine, in the middle of a war, can approve a medical cannabis legalization bill in committee, putting it one more vote from Zelensky's desk, which also just seems crazy to me. We did everything so that patients could get their medicine as soon as possible. You'd think Germany can still do their job and pass the bill for the German citizens. Ultimately who the bill's for. And why this conflict has anything to do with stopping all progress in German government is completely beyond me, right? So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I just think this is crazy. I will update you if this actually passes. Probably the only good thing coming out of Ukraine right now. But all that to say, I pray for everyone there. Hope more lives get saved than lost, at least from now on going forward, because we can't change what's happened. And if you did want to read on the details of this or this last story, grab the link in the comments, as there will be more. But of course, I will update you once Germany decides to finally get back to their shit and do their work. And then if there's any update out of Ukraine. But with that, why we are seeing these changes, of course, in ending cannabis prohibition, Marijuana Moment with one of them, because human use of cannabis for food, fiber, psychoactive effects stretches back millennia, new report says. Yeah, no shit. This is the kind of information that has been suppressed for a very, very long time. It's nice to see that it is seeing the light of day again, as this comes from a new paper in the European Journal of Chemistry, traces the history back for many, many reasons. I mean, I'm sure many of you are aware of this. If you're new to the channel, you might not be, and it is a fascinating rabbit hole to go down if you're not aware. And so all that to say, more here if you wanted to pause to read. I'm not going to spend too much time because I'm aware of a lot of this. Obviously, there's always more to learn, but link in the comments if you wanted to go through that, as history is a fascinating subject. And so with that, another one from Marijuana Moment, as cannabis consumers who caught that had better outcomes and mortality rates than non-users, study finds. Now this, I'm pretty sure I've seen studies like this in the last few years when this whole situation was ongoing, but we're seeing the same data again afterwards, or a couple years later, reiterating that, yeah, for whatever reason, cannabis users had better outcomes and mortality compared to non-users, the study says, suggesting that the observed benefits might result from cannabis's potential to inhibit viral entry into cells and prevent the releases of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Well, I know we'd know a lot more about this if cannabis had been descheduled 50 years ago or never even put in the Schedule 1 in the first place, and we'd been able to research this, right? Of course. And so, fascinating findings. Hey, folks, read it and weep for yourself. You can pause to read from here to here, otherwise a little bit more down here. And full link in the comments, but fascinating. The data doesn't lie, and cannabis is a miracle plant, it seems, in many ways. Well, we got this one from PLOS ONE, journals.org. Anti-proliferative effect of cannabidiol in prostate cancer cell PC3 is mediated by apoptotic cell death, NFKB activation, increased oxidative stress, and lower reduced glutathione status. And so published as of October 5th, 2023. Long story short, prostate cancer is the second most frequent cancer diagnosed in men in the world today. And so, well, how can we, try to resolve that? Here we found cannabidiol decreased prostate cancer cell viability up to 37.25% and induce apoptotic cell death in a time and dose dependent manner. All that to say is overall, our results suggest that CBD may be effective against prostate cancer cells. If I, for some reason, get told I have prostate cancer, I'm going to start using a fuck ton of CBD, I'll tell you that much. Or at least I'm not going to stop consuming at the rate I am and probably do it a little bit more. But all that to say, more reason why we should have just scheduled 50 years ago, never put cannabis in the stupid Schedule 1 in the first place. But with that, some sales data. Thank you, connoisseurs.io, for making this easy for us. As Connecticut cannabis sales hit 25.2 million in September 2023. And so we can see from August, the sales jumped about 300,000. And then medical sales fell by about 100,000 because cannabis itself is the medicine. And the whole recreational versus medical, that whole thing becomes arbitrary once you actually look into it. But that's a whole other thing to even get politicians involved with or to try and understand at this point. But the breakdown, you can see sales, rec continues to head up, meds slightly heads down as med patients can get their medicine from a rec dispensary. Simple as that. And so with that, from Rhode Island, as they see record adult use cannabis sales as medical purchases fall to lowest since rec cannabis launched. Again, because cannabis itself is the medicine. And once you realize that the whole rec and medical thing is sort of arbitrary, the whole effort was just to get it, free again so that we can use it if we want a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. But with that, Rhode Island saw September sales hit 7.1 million according to the latest numbers, and that's the greatest amount since legal sales to adults since the launch in December of 2022, apparently, while medical cannabis receipts last month came to 2.5 million, a record low since adult use sales began. And I don't need to explain that to you anymore. More down here if you wanted to pause to read a little bit more info as well. Otherwise, full link in the comments about Rhode Island. Well, we got this one from Arizona, as Arizona cannabis sales continue downward trend after peaking in the spring. And I do think that is likely just the unfortunate reality in the West Coast. Cannabis is easier to grow outdoors. You're going to have a lot more illicit cannabis to compete with. But the good thing is that sales are still relatively strong. And then what I found was so funny is that reading through all of this, it doesn't just tell you the sales for the most recent month. It's so weird how it's written, at least in my point of view. I could just be the weird one, I don't know. But I figured I would just bring you down to the chart because the chart highlights the sales in rec for June, which was 85.2 million. And then sales for rec in July, which was 77.3 million, which have all fallen since March of 2023 at 99.8 million, which was the high. And again, this is very strange because compared to every East market, we see typically a record in March and then another record in July and then another record in December. It's not the same for West Coast markets. And again, I think it's just because of all the illicit cannabis that's still available. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments if you have any more insights. But again, as we see, medical goes down because cannabis is the medicine in itself. More down here if you wanted to pause to read, though. But let me know in the comments if you think anything differently. Otherwise, full link is also in the comments if you want to go through that. While we move on to Florida, Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, we can see that Trulieve opened a new dispensary from October 9th to the 13th, a new location in Melbourne. So they're continuing to dominate there with the most dispensary locations, while qualified patient count did increase week over week. And so we can see it jumped up to 853,150, which represents a week over week increase of 1,675 patients. So significant drop from what we saw last week, which was over 2,000, but better than 1,000 at least. While we can see the breakdown of all the MSOs operating in Florida legally, for medical only, keep that in mind, and I'm going to reiterate this later on in the story, but November 8th, I think, is the most important day going forward, because that's when we find out if the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of Americans and Floridians and put legalization for adult use on the November 2024 ballot. But all that to say, we'll get to that later. The number of active dispensary locations for each MSO in Florida, and then we can see for this past week alone, from the 6th to the 12th, the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, the number of milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and the number of ounces of smokable flower sold this past week. So if you're interested in Florida, this is a great resource to keep track of, but fortunately, connoisseurs.io makes this visual nice and easy for us. So from the 6th to the 12th, we got Florida market share, THC market share, CBD market share, while he also includes the patient count and physicians and store openings. But the main thing is the visuals that we like. So thank you, connoisseurs.io. So total flower sales, ounces by company. Of course, Trulieve still leading the way by a lot. Verano second. Total THC sales, milligrams, Trulieve, then Verano in second. Total CBD sales by milligrams, Trulieve, Verano, Air, Curaleaf, Surterra. And then total dispensing locations, Trulieve, Verano, Air, Curaleaf, and Surterra Wellness. So thank you, connoisseurs.io, for that one. Now, a great interview that included Boris Jordan, Executive Chairman of Curaleaf that I would recommend you tuning in if you're interested, because of course Boris, the only billionaire that I know that is willing to get on Twitter Spaces and share his thoughts with us so freely. We appreciate him as he literally builds this new industry from scratch with the rest of the MSO players, and so I really recommend tuning in. So thank you, Jesse Redmond. Higher Exchanges with me, Morgan Paxia, and Maritobi returns with this recording with an update from the latest Curaleaf news. So that link, of course, will be in the comments, but they did touch on a lot, and again, I just wanted to reiterate to you why I think even the news on November 8th is going to be bigger than what we end up seeing with the Safer Banking Act. Of course, I want this bill passed for all the social equity entrepreneurs and small business owners that want to live out their American dream, ultimately. But this is out of our control, thanks to fucking Congress, and I think this is ultimately going to be the bigger domino. And if this happens, this is more likely to happen, I would think, just because Florida, population of 21 million people, 120 million tourists annually, like, yo. And so I imagine there's a lot of views on this. I think Florida is obviously the big one, and for that reason, it reiterates why Florida is so big. This one from CL Tampa, pot giant Trulieve spends another $500K to legalize rec cannabis in Florida. And so the reality is you got to pay to play, probably regardless of the industry, and the committee has spent up to date $39.5 million, $545 million as of September 30th, the report posted in the State Division of Elections website showed. And so if we get a negative ruling on November 8th, it just goes to show that $40 million still isn't enough to get the Supreme Court of Florida to work for the Floridians and the American people and democracy, as opposed to the AG's desires based on, whatever's pushing that. So all that to say is I think we're going to get a positive ruling on November 8th, because this is America after all. But these are truly wild times that we're living in, and I think they are honestly about to get a little bit more exciting, at least for us cannabis folk. And with that, from Todd Harrison, a reminder that even before that news, AGP polls indicate Ohio's adult use measure will pass. And if we can get this news, a few days before Florida's ballot being confirmed, holy fuck, I think that is huge. Again, this is just me. Let me know in the comments whether you think the opposite or not, or why you think the same as me or not. Please, folks, let me know. Otherwise, all of these links will also be in the comments, but I will click on it for a closer view if you wanted to go through that. Does it tell us the date on when we'll find out? I don't happen to know the date of the Ohio election, so if you wouldn't mind, let me know in the comments when that is supposed to be. Just offhand, I don't remember. But anyways, with that, some more news from Dennis Rudev from investment firms that I wouldn't have access to, so thank you, Dennis, for sharing these, but also just take them with a grain of salt, because they are snippets from investment firms. And so this one is from, I don't actually know the source on this, but seems legit. Who is it? It doesn't actually specify. Maybe the next one will show, but anyway, some update out of Canada and some update out of the US, if you'd like. And then Cannacord Genuity, that is who it is. So Cannabis Monthly, number of transactions have closed over the last 6 months. I think this is maybe M&A they're referring to. I'm not exactly sure. Didn't go through all the details of this. But then 3 returns for selected cannabis companies over indicated periods. This could be an interesting one, providing the 1 week price return, 1 month, 3 month, and 1 year. So an interesting perspective looking at that. And then lastly, share price performance of top 10 companies by market cap since April of 2023, I believe, until now. And so that was from Cannacord Genuity, if you're interested. Well, thank you, Dennis Rudev, for this one, as well as it loads from Roth. So weekly cannabis recap. Again, take these with a grain of salt. They are still speculation. So while it's interesting perspective, doesn't mean they're correct as well. Weekly rehash, U.S. legislative, U.S. consumer, global, medical wellness, company highlights. So you can pause to read. And man, that's a lot of resources. So I imagine that's why you pay a good amount of money to get access to this stuff. But the weekly rehash, sequential trends in Q3, wholesale price deflation continues to weigh on growth. Unfortunate, especially because of the West Coast and the illicit cannabis there. While Exhibit 1 headset data shows Q3 2023 sales up 4% quarter over quarter. That's very promising despite this, I would say. And then Q3 2023 early indications. Seasonally stronger Q2 and Q3 lead to historically softer Q4 and weaker Q1. So take from that what you will, but lots of information here if you're interested. Exhibit 3, price deflation weighs on industry growth. Exhibit 4, price stabilization as rate of change showing improvement. So lots of data, again, from Cannabis Benchmarks and Roth MKM if you're interested. But with that, we got this from Jesse Redmond, so thank you, Jesse, for sharing this data. We continue to see consumers gravitating toward convenience as people are rolling their own less and love the infused and mini pre-rolls. So this is an industry report from headset.io, so I'll put the link to the report in the comments. I'll also put this post from Jesse. But just to highlight, pre-rolls continue to rise in popularity. As he said, they're the third largest category in the US after flower and vape pens. In Canada, pre-rolls take the number 2 spot behind flower sales. I still buy either ounces or half ounces or 7 grams and then roll myself, but I'll always roll my own joints, most likely. Pre-roll sales grew 13.4% year over year in the US, 36.5% in Canada, vastly outperforming other cannabis products. So fascinating. Flower will remain king. Love to see that. And so it looks at the breakdown in Canada and the US from 2022 to 2023. While another one from Anthony Varell, partner at the Dales Report. Great chart put out by Frank over at Viridian this morning. I suggest you burn this into the back of your eyelids and keep these metrics front and center when picking your ponies in cannabis land. Looking at net cash flows after interest expenses, capex, taxes, and debt maturity. So essentially cash left over after paying all of this. And so while this is a complicated chart, especially when you look at, well, what is the maximum net cash flow deficit as a percentage of market cap? I have no idea what that means. I'll admit it. But looking at it, it seems like right now the healthiest companies based on who might have positive net cash flow in 2024 would be right now Curaleaf, Verano, and GTI. Now, when we look at 2025, I think that's the most important thing because, of course, we're looking forward at the potential growth, especially if Florida is successful, if Ohio is successful, yada, yada, if we see the rescheduling announcement, if SAFER actually passes, all that to say, right? But net cash flow 2025, it seems to me that this is factored in with the removal of 280E as well. So again, we have to consider that as a fact with making this chart. I could be wrong. That's just my interpretation. But again, I'm just trying to be transparent with you all. And then, of course, the max deficit to market cap, I do believe it's like the deficit between how much cash flow they're bringing in versus their current market cap is very, very bad. But the difference it can make come 2025, once they do become cash flow positive and we get all of these catalysts and factors, I think it could make a world of difference. Now, that is my best explanation of this. I could be wrong, but again, just trying to be transparent and give you my interpretation. So let me know in the comments. But all that to say is, I think this looks a lot better for these companies. These companies here, 2025 looks a lot better than 2024, especially if all catalysts do end up happening. And I mean, again, the momentum looks like they're all set up to eventually happen. So let me know what you guys think in the comments though, folks. And so with that, on to some MSO news though. So Curaleaf to report third quarter 2023 financial and operational results November 9th after market close. We got a few MSOs on the 8th. Now we're going to have a few on the 9th. Curaleaf will be at 5 p.m. most likely, after the trading day. So love to see that. Full link in the comments if you want to read any more details of this. While Curaleaf applies to list subordinate voting shares on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So seeing them take the next step similar to what we saw TerrAscend take. Good for Curaleaf and any investors there, I imagine, because it's going to be less shorting and less, unfortunately, abuse and manipulation from being on the CSE. And so they're just happy to announce that they've filed its application to list on the TSX. The company completed a market offering of subordinate voting shares on October 3rd, a very small percentage needed to, in order to satisfy a condition required to potentially uplist. And so information here if you wanted to read it. While we've got this one from Cannabis, as they're going to report their third quarter 2023 results on November 14th, 2023, before market opens at 8 a.m. EST. And so very much looking forward to see how some of these companies' bottom lines will be improved, especially from Missouri and Maryland recently coming online. That's going to be hot to watch, I think. And so with that, TerrAscend raises their full year 2023 guidance out of nowhere because clearly it's going to be better than what they had anticipated. And so that's good news for investors. So just going to share the highlights. If you wanted to grab the full link, I'll leave this here if you wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, grab the full link in the comments. But I think it essentially highlights it. Company expects full year 2023 net revenue and adjusted EBITDA from continuing operations of at least $317 million and $63 million, respectively, versus previous guidance of $305 million and $58 million, respectively. And so a $5 million increase of adjusted EBITDA, essentially, and a $12 million increase of net revenue. Expects gross margin to exceed 50% in the second half of the year. Expects positive free cash flow from continuing operations in second half of the year as well. Investor Day will be hosted on the 13th. Now, what are these little 1 asterisks? That's the one thing that gets me curious. Definition and reconciliation of non-GAAP measures, of course. So based on their definitions and their reconciliation of what these are. But all that to say is TerrAscend looks to be optimistic about their future, hence the new guidance. And with that from Verano, they expand their retail footprint in Connecticut with the opening of ZenLeaf Newington, the company's second social equity joint venture location in Connecticut and fourth dispensary statewide. I imagine we'd see more social equity joint ventures if the Safer Banking Bill were to have passed 2.5 years ago, right? But I digress. All that to say is Verano is expanding their footprint into Connecticut. A recently or I would say a fairly new legal adult use market, which we covered the recent sales in that, which continue to go up. But Verano, happy to share, they have 134 dispensaries in 13 states with 14 cultivation and processing facilities supplying all their operations. So more information here about their new shop in Connecticut if you're interested. Otherwise, full link in the comments. But with that, on to Trulieve, as we got one of the big underrated news stories of the week. Trulieve announces filing of amended federal tax returns claiming $143 million refund, which I think is a pretty boss move by Kim, as they announced the filing of an amended federal tax returns with refund claims for several of the company's business entities for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021. Fuck yeah. They're basically saying, yeah, we're a regular company just like anyone else, and it's time to stop the discrimination and treat us like that. In total, the company is claiming a refund of $143 million from taxes paid, which the company believes it does not owe, although there is no guarantee of receipt. The determination is supported by legal interpretations that challenge the company's tax liability under Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code. So we love to essentially say, hey, we're going to take legal action without taking legal action, but this is the first step in how we're going to do it. And I'm just sharing my best interpretation of this, basically from what Canna said. So I wanted to share this to give him credit, because his guess is Trulieve is arguing that certain operational expenses in the past should have been classified under cost of goods sold, thus reducing their tax burden, a strategy a number of companies already use, particularly in the private markets as opposed to publicly traded MSOs, but also every other U.S. industry gets to do that. The only one that's discriminated against and still can't is the cannabis industry. And that's the big issue with ending prohibition, is ending the discrimination that this industry should never still face at this point in time. That's some comments for context if you are interested. And then with that, from GreenThumb, as they've announced, they will open Rise Dispensary Brandon in Florida, its 9th retail location. Wow, they've only got 9 retail locations. They really got to play catch up in Florida. On October 14th. And so looking at the cutoff date, hence why it wasn't included there. So we'll likely see this dispensary included in next week's report. But all that to point out is the new dispensary will host a grand opening event on the 26th of October, where profits from that day will be donated to the Florida Justice Center. Love to see these MSOs giving back without the ridiculous virtue signaling that we see from all the other mainstream companies for all the, trendy whatever happens over the summer. Anyways, more information here if you wanted to pause to read. Full link in the comments. With that, from Cresco Labs, as they launch Good News brand in Pennsylvania with new sweet trochets. And so more information here if you wanted to pause to read, but good to see Cresco trying to get their brand and some potentially good selling edibles into new markets where they can increase their market share. Well, with that, from Boris Jordan, so onto some state news, but it's essentially also Curaleaf news and state news. But this comes from a Curaleaf announcement, as this week the Office of Cannabis Management offered registered organizations, and this means MSOs in New York, so the New York Office of Cannabis Management offered New York MSOs the opportunity to submit application materials required to begin adult use sales in New York. Hey, we're finally getting there. We've submitted 3 documents for our application: Community Impact Plan, Energy and Environmental Plan, and Medical Patient Preservation Plan. Man, these clowns in New York. But all that to say, hey, things are looking up in New York. And so Boris reiterates the Curaleaf team has been proud to serve New York's medical cannabis patients with dedication and care since 2017. And we're eager to provide that same level of attention to adult use consumers. And so thank God for that lawsuit, because it has forced the Marxists into a corner where they have to finally allow the MSOs to legally supply the demand and provide a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative they've been doing since 2017. It only makes fucking sense. So it really just exposes the Office of Cannabis Management for being shitty, incompetent Marxists, and why we need to fire them all and just replace them with competent individuals. That's really going to make all the difference. But with that, an interesting article from this WKTV. I'm not going to play it or anything. I just needed to share this headline because, again, it's just more of New York. New York State to issue more than 1,000 new cannabis licenses. They're not necessarily more of New York, but it's more of the incompetent Marxists thinking that it's a win to hand out licenses when you still can't convert those licenses into actual functional shops. These fucking idiots. And so anyways, just hilarious. You can grab the link if you wanted to watch the video, but it's just more exposing the ridiculousness of the Office of Cannabis Management before the potential solutions are, going to be coming underway. And so on top of that, just wanted to share this from Cannabis Business Times, as I think this is older news from the 10th, but a lot has happened, and I'm just trying to, piece it all together for you. But New York judge grants exemption allowing 5 CA-URD licensees to open dispensaries. While the order will increase the state's adult use retail footprint to 28 operators, compared to the 8,000 illegal operators, amid a lawsuit preventing 435 others from moving forward. And so, isn't that fascinating though? That was from the 10th, and then as of the 12th, we get that 1,000 new licenses are handed out. It's because they can't actually turn these licenses into real shops, I think because of this court case also. So it seems just more of like this is PR that they want to get out there to make the OCM look a little bit better than how bad they've looked over the last 2.5 years. And so anyways, more information here on this entire story. But yeah, this one is from October 10th, while this one about the 1,000 new licenses is actually from October 12th. And then so from Marijuana Moment, New Jersey regulators unveil cannabis education campaign with plans to promote delivery service options to deter impaired driving. Another common sense solution to a problem that scares everybody, but you find out that when you look at the data, cannabis legalization doesn't actually increase impaired driving. It causes it to go down significantly, or not significantly by a good amount. Also, it causes alcohol, DUIs, and drunk driving to go down too. And so while that's a fascinating thing, sure, yes, we can serve people that are worried about this by ensuring that we can provide delivery services that will take care of that. Fuck yes. Love to see ending cannabis prohibition leading to new solutions and common sense policy. And so that seems to be the new plan in New Jersey. It's a campaign though, so obviously once we get more information out of this, I will like to provide an update. But more information here if you wanted to pause to read and grab the link in the comments. Love to see New Jersey making more common sense policy decisions and changes than New York. They seem to get it and always have been a little bit ahead, unfortunately. But with that, from newsnationnow.com, as Georgia to be the first state to offer medical cannabis in pharmacies. And so this was a story that I found last Saturday that I couldn't include in my last week's story, but I added it in the comments of stories missed. Essentially, the details we know now, the product will not be sold in national drugstores like CVS or Walgreens yet, but you can only assume that if this first step is taken, they might get there. Cannabis is still not legal for rec use in Georgia, we know, and pot can be used to treat a variety of medical issues, most notably pain. But all that to say, more details here if you wanted to pause to read. But reports that the Georgia Board of Pharmacy began accepting applications this week, and nearly 120 small business pharmacies have agreed to provide medication from botanical sciences. But then does that also imply that for whatever reason the 120 pharmacies have agreed to only supply botanical sciences and not Trulieve? I have no idea. I'm just reading this now, so let me know in the comments if you happen to know more. But maybe they're also leaving Trulieve out of the article because they don't want to spark any more lawsuits like we're continuously seeing in Georgia and Alabama. I have no idea, just thinking out loud. But I found this, so thank you connoisseurs.io for sharing this, because it's essentially just another visual. Because if we can see how spread out the 120 pharmacies actually are, that's kind of nice. And so just look at the market penetration from botanical sciences alone, which is listed 119 pharmacies is coming soon. Waiting to see what pharmacies will carry Trulieve's products in GA, so it seems like that's undetermined. And there are about 400 independent pharmacies. So wait for an update on this. I will give it to you folks. Any comments down here for anyone that's interested, I figured I would share as well. But definitely a very cool one. Thank you, connoisseurs.io, for that one. But with that, unfortunate news out of California, go figure, Gavin Newsom can't do anything right when we need him to, as California governor says no to cannabis cafes. Why? You have bars. How can you continue to discriminate for any other reason than your, lobbyists or your funders pay you to look the other way? As the governor said, the bill would undermine the state's smoke-free rules. Can you drink in public? Probably not, but you can drink at a bar. Fucking idiot, Gavin Newsom. Anyways, more information here if you wanted to pause to read. The hypocrisy is just blatant, and the irony is hilarious. But with that, from Marijuana Moment, on to Pennsylvania, as House approves 280 tax cut for cannabis businesses over GOP objections. Big win for medical suppliers in Pennsylvania. I don't know how quickly this will actually go into effect, but hopefully sooner than later, as that will see, of course, all the MSOs in Pennsylvania for medical only at least save on some taxes for their medical sales. And of course, Pennsylvania is one of these three states behind Ohio, Florida, and PA, which is likely the third of these last three big medical states to eventually flip for adult use. And so on that topic, Pennsylvania is the fifth most populated state and home to 127 MSO stores. A lot of shops, a lot of potential when that flips. So the massive opportunity when PA does flip, but when that happens is unclear. But just to highlight all the MSOs and the number of shops, I'm not sure you can see, but Ascend has either one or two. TerrAscend has, I believe, 6, and then Consortium has probably 3 based on the size of the bar here. And then I think you can see Jushi and the rest. But so all that to point out, if we exit this and then point out this is Inquirer from Pennsylvania, I just featured that same article, the Inquirer, when will weed be legal in PA? The outlook is hazy, unfortunately. Optimists say it's coming, realists aren't so sure, but that also seems to just be an issue in the legislature. where they cannot agree on how they want to get that done. But with that, on to news from Minnesota as demand for cannabis classes grows after rec cannabis legalization in Minnesota. Clearly, other states are way ahead of PA. Once you end prohibition, so many new benefits come about: tax revenues, jobs, demand for cannabis classes, because a new industry has been created out of thin air. Not necessarily a new industry, of course, it's always been there, but there's always just been a gray market as opposed to a legal one. We might as well have a legal one so that a legal market can flourish and offset the illicit ones. No shit. But good news, how many cannabis plants they're allowed to grow and what they'll need to do it. I mean, I wish it was 2024, but I think it's, unfortunately, probably 2025. And so all that to say, commercial cannabis is not coming to Minnesota for a while, but whoever gets first dibs on this eventual commercial cannabis market, going to create a lot of wealth for themselves, their family, and their community, I would imagine. And so with that, from Sammy J, this is an interesting one just on top of a Todd Harrison tweet saying, Elephant Alert, FPA Crescent Fund files in U.S. cannabis. So just a bit of details: 1.8 million shares of GTI, 1.6 million of Verano, 2.4 million of Cresco, 650K of Trulieve, apparently. And so there's a link there. But main thing that Sammy highlights is that this fund has total assets under management as of end of September 2023, 9.2 billion. And so this is also sort of something that we want to see. And because we've seen this, it's very reassuring that we might see more of this. As Sammy J stated on Mayor Toby Spaces, this has always been a big part of the bull thesis. The pool MCs of investable U.S. public cannabis companies is so limited that if 100 of these sizable funds enter the space, they'll likely envelope floats. Or the same way to say that, I think, at least, correct me wrong if I'm wrong in the comments, but it would inflate the prices, of course, and see the opposite of what we've been seeing for essentially the last 2.5 years. Now, I could be wrong, but I'll just share these images if you're interested, essentially highlighting the legitimacy of FPA Crescent Fund as a fund. And I guess this is the information of their new recent purchases. And so on top of that, though, because I did want to share, I mean, Sammy J and a lot of people know more about this technicals than I do. And so again, I don't want to try and look like I'm the expert in this. I'm just sharing the information so that you can, compare with what you know. But then Sammy J shared this: SEC adopts rules to increase transparency into short selling. And this is as of October 13th, 2023. So literally yesterday. From the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC adopts rule to increase transparency into short selling and amendment to CAT NMS plan for purposes of short sale data collection. So while I'm not going to try to pretend like I understand what this means besides increasing transparency into short selling, which you'd like to think is hopefully reducing the overall short selling, I did just want to share this for context because this kind of touches off what we saw last week when there was a lot of potential accusations of short selling and even MSOS manipulating the cannabis stocks itself. And so this week we saw this long write-up from a accredited investor, apparently some guy that has a lot of experience and has been in this industry for a while, Bruce McDonald. Now, this is him touching on this recent development, I believe, this tweet. Now, there's this other tweet that I was asked about MSOS short interest. Shorts are a slippery topic and got into a big thing about it. And so second view, you can pause to read. Last in this thesis, you can pause to read. And this is in response to another tweet. He said, just because people dream up a conspiracy theory doesn't make it so. Let's dig into the realities of MSOS. And so I do invite you to grab the link in the comments and read through this if you haven't yet. Of course, you can just pause to read from markets down to here, and then Arb House down to here. And so again, this is in context answering this tweet from MJ Stock Trader last week about this thread, which I didn't include in my video because it was strictly speculation. Now, just to bring you back to where we're at, again, I just recommend reading through this if you're interested, whether you believe that shorts have a big impact in the cannabis industry or whether you believe that they don't. I think it's fair to say, though, that okay, great. So we're back to the original tweet, and of course you can pause to read all of that or grab the link in the comments to read what Bruce has to say. I just want to point out that it is true that we can go to shortdata.ca, click largest short positions, and go to the CSE where these MSOs have to be because they're discriminated against like any other industry, and we can see that they're still the largest short positions on the CSE. And while the percentage change has decreased over the last, or since September 30th, we can see, so it seems like the shorts are covering, they're still the most heavily shorted on the CSE. And so no doubt there is still shorting. And I believe that there's still likely manipulation, probably from Canadian hedge funds, because from my understanding, naked short selling is still legal in Canada for whatever reason. Shouldn't be anymore. Hence why it's more likely coming from Canadian culprits as opposed to US, because the US, I believe, naked shorting is illegal after 2008. Well, if we go to top covered shorts, again, CSE, we can see that the percentage is changing, but these are still the top covered shorts and the largest short positions on the CSE. So the reality is we know that there's some shorting, just to the degree we'll never know ultimately, right, folks? As much as we want to control or we want to know, we'll never know, much like we'll never know when the rescheduling is going to happen. It's going to happen when it happens on their timeline, not ours. But with that, last few things from the government of Canada. Take this with a grain of salt because our government is not the same government it was when they legalized. But legislative review of the Cannabis Act, what we heard report. I mean, the data doesn't lie, and we've got plenty of studies and data to show that ending cannabis prohibition speaks for itself. But essentially, you can go through everything that Canada has released in this report that is a few years late, I do believe. Download the PDF. Full link in the comments if you're interested. But on top of that, a Globe and Mail article. It's unfortunately behind a paywall, but figured I would share it as it was titled, positively for once, U.S. cannabis reforms could send pot stocks higher if all these reforms that we've been lied to for the last 2.5 years and that look, the foreshadowing, the momentum look as if they're going to come to fruition in hopefully the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. Rather see these sort of headlines than not. And so all that to point out, not much that we can look at, but from this past week, despite, a tough overall market, we're seeing all of these we're seeing MSOS and U.S. cannabis companies close green to end a tough week. So can't ask for much more than that, essentially, given everything that's happening. And folks, just to reiterate, November 8th for me is the biggest date looking forward. Of course, if for whatever reason we get the rescheduling announcement before that, that'll be huge, but it's going to be Ohio first, then November 8th. If this rules in favor of cannabis, boom. I think everything else is off to the races. If this doesn't, we've got much bigger fucking problems to deal with. And worth noting, Toby Cannabis does relay a very interesting point and one worth considering and not ignoring. 6 of the 10 largest states have yet to legalize rec cannabis, or 7 considering New York's current status, because New York is not really a legal market at all. But you think about that, Texas, Florida, number 2, folks. We find out November 8th, less than a month, and we're going to be celebrating. Then New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois is already legal. Ohio, of course, we're waiting on them before. So we're going to have Ohio and Florida. Big fucking deal. This news in the next month. So Georgia, North Carolina are the last one. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody. Take care until next time.